Uh, Hello, everybody. My name is Jack Tchen. I'm the director of the Price Institute at Rutgers at Newark. Welcome to the Price Institute's program for Earth Day. And we're looking at, we're very fortunate to have Winona LaDuke speak with us on COVID-19 and the Indigenous just transition, the Renewable Society of the seventh generation. So in addition to Winona LaDuke, we also have Bebelle, who's coming to us from New Orleans, and also Maria Lopez Nuñez, who's coming to us from the Ironbound section of Newark, New Jersey. I'm speaking to you from the Pemaquid Peninsula, where I came up for spring break, and I'm still here. This place is Abenaki, and Pemaquid refers to situated far out. We have the lighthouse that's on the main quarter, and it's a rock formation that juts right into the ocean. We are on the land and waters stewarded by the Wabanaki peoples of the Wabanaki Confederacy for over 13,000 years. The Wabanaki is Algonquian for people of the dawn. 50 years ago, I was at the University of Wisconsin, still saying I was going to be a geneticist, but more and more learning about what was happening in the US war in Southeast Asia. And I was learning about napalm in particular, which was being dropped, this gel being dropped on people and the land, and basically burning and poisoning the land and waters of Southeast Asia. And these were the original lands of Australasian peoples displaced over the centuries into the mountains. Now I'm privileged to direct the Clement A. Price Institute at Rutgers at Newark, which are the lands of the Munsee Lenape peoples adjacent to the once pristine Passaic River and adjacent to the Hackensack River and the Hudson Rivers. On the Passaic, there's still one of 16 fishing weirs that's still there in the middle of the river. And it stands as one of the oldest human-made structures in the Northeast. The river is also where the dioxin-filled herbicide, the dioxin that was the herbicide Agent Orange, that was manufactured in New York and dumped into the Passaic River. Each place that we're going to be looking at today really tells, in some ways, a similar story. So the four places that we're at right now are in some ways fractal. And in many ways, I think what Dr. Martin Luther King talked about when he gave his famous Riverside Church talk about Beyond Vietnam in April 1967, he was talking about the giants of the giant triplets warring against the world's peoples. One was racism, the other was militarism, and the other one was extreme materialism. And in many ways today, we're really not in a very different situation. We have over 800 military bases, the US around the world. And in fact, it's the military and the production to keep the military up that is the largest source of global pollution right now. So in some ways, the four places that we're all from will tell variations of the same story, but at the same time, the foundational story of dispossession, of colonialism, of the Dutch and the British coming into the Northeast, and disease coming with them, and also violence coming with them, and they're pushing people off the land through the legal structures of Western deeds that really forced the Algonquian-speaking peoples further and further away. So in some ways, we have to understand that as in some ways the founding fractal, the founding historical example that set the precedent for the whole nation. And all the people who have come since then have been deeply impacted by that. So we're fortunate today to have a friend and a fantastic speaker and activist and eco-economist, Winona LaDuke, who's going to be speaking to you from the White Earth Reservation, where wild rice grows on the water. I won't say any more. Winona is someone who is just fantastic, has involved all the important struggles of the past number of decades, and she'll tell you more about what she's been working on. So without any more delay, Winona LaDuke.
Aneen, can you hear me okay? All right, Aneen, Dinaway Maganatuk, hello, my relatives. Really nice to visit, meet all of you today. And then I know there are some people out there that I don't know, but I'm honored to be here, and it's an interesting time for all of us. So I want to say Happy New Year. Happy New Year. This is the Ojibwe New Year right now, which just started. You know, our first harvest of the season, kind of when the Mother Earth wakes up, is maple syruping. And so I've been out in the sugar bush with my grandchildren and extended family for about the past 3 weeks. And you know, so I say Happy New Year. This it is sweet in the woods. It is sweet in the woods. And so I think about that, and you know, a couple of things I want to say is you know, this moment we're in now, Mother Earth can breathe. You know, you can see the sun in China and you can see the stars at night. We got 20% less air pollution across the board. I think it might even be higher, you know, and then fossil fuel use has dropped pretty significantly. And so we're kind of in this moment where we're not really doing the right thing, but we're doing way better than we were 6 months ago, you know, and I just want to point that out to everybody, that Mother Earth really appreciates taking a breath. And if you take care of your mother, you're more likely to be healthy yourself, which, you know, I don't want to say I told you so, but sometimes I feel like saying I told you so. Don't do dumb stuff, and dumb stuff won't happen to you. You know, I mean, you know, I find this strange juxtaposition because I'm harvesting maple syrup from trees that are probably 400, 500 years old. And someone just had the wisdom to leave something standing and not cut the darn thing down, you know? And sometimes if you just leave it good, it's like value is so much greater in so many ways. You know, that's why like the Menominee Nation has the same amount of trees standing today as they did 150 years ago, because they selectively cut and they have a good maple syruping season. You know, and so that's kind of like the Mother Earth economy. That's the one that you just respectful, observant, things will go good. You know, and then we have this moment that we're in, which is, you know, really not bad. And even the UN Environment Secretary, Inger Anderson, I think is the name, said, you know, the COVID crisis is really indicative of the loss of biodiversity. You know, you keep encroaching on little creatures' habitat and acting like you're all super mighty, like humans and all, like, because we're super anthropocentric, you know, like we got this. And then you find out you actually don't got this because we're not in charge. You know, we all think we're in charge, but no, mostly a bunch of white guys think we're in charge, but they're not in charge actually. I think that, you know, in our traditions, there's these old time stories about little creatures that just like save the Ojibwe, or save Mother Earth, or save something, you know. And the bat has this tremendous history, epic history, you know, of releasing the sun, you know, and arranging a lot of seasons, like important stuff, you know. But we don't think about the little creatures in our capitalist society. We think about how fast we can move to extract something. And, you know, if you look at the epic creatures, like you may not think much about them, but boy, they can do big things. They can do big things. And we're kind of in the big things of the bat right now, Bakwanachi, that's how we say it in our language. So we're at this moment where we're looking at what happens when you do dumb stuff, and Mother Earth just, you know, slow everything down. And as I say, take a breath. And, you know, I was reading what Dr. Tchen sent me this morning about Arundhati Roy talking about the portal, the pandemic as a portal. I thought that was so interesting because, you know, I would say the same thing. It's this moment in time where you're forced to change your world. You know, no one changes their world usually in our little self-centered American world full of all kind of made up stuff on their own. You know, you got to have like some kind of a mega crisis to change. And you know, most people's mega crisis is they can't charge their phone, or maybe they didn't get their little special cappuccino that they wanted down there at Starbucks. Well, those are really real crises. Those are first world crises. And this is like you know, this is this moment where you have enlightenment. And so I'm taking this moment. I would have been out there doing really fabulous lectures. You know, I have a great time doing that. I have a lot of fun. I meet a lot of interesting people, see interesting parts of the world, but a lot of times I like to go home. So I just had to go home. You know, I've been home where the wild things are. That's where I live, where there's like bears, and there's a beaver in my yard. I thought I'd tell you that, Jack. I was looking through my binoculars. They're all busy down there in the yard. There's the frogs came out. That's how you know the season changes, is when the frogs start. You know, it has nothing to do with what day it says it is. It's when did the frogs come, you know? And in this little world, you remember kind of who you are, and then you see this world that we could be. You know, so for me, I'm looking out there and I'm saying, well, we basically, if you want to meet the Paris Accords, you got to cut your fossil fuels consumption to the level we're at now. Got to do that. Probably should do a little more just for good measure, you know. Don't want to be pushy or anything, but you know, what if you could figure out how to do that? And what if we just did? I mean, didn't the price of oil just go to negative $37? I was like, wow, that's gotta suck to be an oil company. I'm sorry, I was crying earlier today, but I've given up my tears on that one. You know, I mean, the fossil fuel industry is like collapsing. There's like 20% of the world's oil supply hanging around off of California right now, and they're closing down mines up in Canada. They're still in refineries across the country, and the pipelines don't have any oil to put in them because nobody wants it. You know, we've been saying time to move on. And apparently it's time to move on when it's minus $37 a barrel. That means that oil wants to stay in the ground. That's my economic observation. So you look at that, and then you look at this opportunity where people have to learn to be self-sufficient. You can't even order your seeds anymore. There's a waiting list. Everybody's ordering seeds all across North America because they're like, well, I don't think the store is going to hold it for me. So I'm going to grow. So we had to find our inner selves, and we're finding it. You know, and I think we should just do a resilience challenge. We can talk about that later, but you know, we need to self-transform our own addictive Wendigo behavior that we all got. You know, I'm right in there with you. I'm struggling. You know, every day it's like a new thing. I don't really need that. I'm not going to the store. You know, so I'm pretty good because I live in a rural area. I can relocalize pretty well. But let's do that. Let's relocalize. Let's get efficient. Let's count on each other. You know, it doesn't look like systems are going to take good care of us. You know, let's rebuild real communities. So I see this as a good, you know, as a doorway to walk through. And you know, we talked about this as our prophecies. It's called this the time of the seventh fire. Said you got a choice between two paths. One is well worn, but one's scorched. And you got to take the one that's green. That's this. So that's kind of my opening thoughts, and I was really interested to hear what my fellow esteemed panelists, I don't know, esteemed panelists, my sister panelists, have to say from their other cool places in the world. And my heart goes out to you, you know, my city sisters, my city sisters. But you know, I'm gonna take care of our biodiversity up there, and we'll all do our part to change these things, because it's not just individual, obviously. I'm not gonna say go and like get all local and buy green. I'm gonna say we gotta change society. You know, and that's this opportunity, and I, you know, it's a door or a portal. We're gonna walk through it together.
Thank you, Winona. I'm really delighted that we have Bebelle, who's coming to us from the central city of New Orleans. She's a poet, a writer, thought leader, activist, and a co-founder of the Ashe Cultural Center. So after lockdown, anytime you're in the region, go to Ashe. It's really an incredible place. And also we have Maria Lopez Nuñez, who is in the Ironbound section of Newark, and she's an advocate and organizer, director of environmental justice and community development at the Ironbound Community Corporation in Newark, New Jersey. So love to maybe begin with Maria, and you could say something about what you do and pick up a point that Winona raised. Maria.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, the It's in the city of Newark, and I recognize that there's a lot of folks that don't even know the city of Newark, because usually folks fly over us or they fly to Newark, but to get to New York. And so our neighborhood has undistinguished, the undistinguished opportunity to um, be New York City's kind of dumping ground, right? We have in our small little 3 square mile neighborhood, we have a garbage incinerator, the largest sewage waste treatment plant, as Jackie was saying, the Passaic River, which is a river that's been abused for centuries, arguably, right? It was the reason that Newark became the largest city in the state of New Jersey. But then during the Vietnam War, folks were just dumping dioxin into the river. And so now it's become the longest Superfund, because there's dioxin, and it's a tidal river, our river. So it goes, it flows both ways. So it spread all that toxicity for 17 miles. That is something that our community has, been paying attention to for decades. I'm really proud to work in our community because it's been always a community of resistance. It was unfortunately found, the Ironbound was a neighborhood that was developed as workforce housing. So when I hear Winona talk about extraction is something that we can see in the neighborhood very clearly, like both our folks being extracted, but also the relationship with the earth, right? It's more common to look out into the Ironbound and see smokestacks. That's more common than it is trees. We only have 5% tree coverage. Unfortunately here, for the industrial legacy, is that folks have just covered everything in concrete. So when it's hot outside, there are nights when I wake up and it's like I could taste the way the air smells in my neighborhood. So that's something that obviously when we hear it's a respiratory disease out there, it horrified our neighborhood, both because we recognize what's in the sky and the lack of respect for the sky. And because so many of our folks are either on essential workers or folks who are undocumented and who were dropped with no considerations, who don't qualify for any type of stimulus or programs. So that's kind of the context that we're coming out of, and our fight to protect our mother comes from. I thought all crisis is an opportunity. So it's sad to say, but the old stuff was not working anyway. So what do we have to lose but to let go of everything that has been before us? And I think tragically, it's something that's happening in our communities. ICE are being called on people still just to get them out of their building because, real estate speculators still prefer to have an empty building that they could flip for profit than to have people sheltered in place. So I think when I've always been very inspired by and take our teachings from our Indigenous siblings and from our Black activist siblings in this country. There's so much, I'm from Central America, I'm from Honduras. And as our folks have been forced migration into this country, because this country is an imperial monster, right? That has destroyed a lot of other parts of the world. And so, as the children of those folks that were forced to migrate, I recognize the legacy, though, of resistance that is present here, and hope to, just join that path to just transition that's led by Indigenous and Black folks. And I hope that, the Indigenous folks coming up from Central and South America, that we all just join in. And I think they're in that unity in this moment, we can all walk through the portal together.
Carol, if you could give us a little sense of what the many things you've done, but just a little taste of what you've done and how it connects to Earth Day.
So I started out as a public servant who was a human service planner. And so my job was to essentially imagine human solutions and create programmatic ways to attend to them. Along that path, I began to work as my contribution to community with churches and cultural organizations and begin to get a really deep appreciation for the power that culture played in human solutions, and began to discover how critical it was for people to be able to operate inside of their authentic self, and to belong. You know, Maslow teaches us that, you know, we can't manage to do anything else until we've taken care of primary needs, and belonging is a core element inside of that. And it is out of that appreciation, that core appreciation, that my awareness and my understanding of the power of culture began to grow. And so when I got into midlife crisis, I made the decision to step out of the public sector and to start working more directly with folks who were doing that kind of work. That essentially led me to both meet Douglas Redd, and for us over time to make the decision to establish a cultural arts center, community-based cultural arts center that wanted to use culture and art as the tools for doing human and community and economic development. And so I did that for 21 years, finding ways to be able to be solving, working to solve human problems and looking for the cultural lens into that. And then fighting really hard to get people to understand that as long as we are asking people to not be themselves, that we're going to have problems. You know, Winona has got it right. You know, Maria has got it right. You know, that if we're not able to own and honor the earth, that we are going to be in trouble. And if we're not willing to honor the sibling character of humanity, as Maria talks about it, then we're going to be in trouble again. That if we can't all sit around the welcome table, that we're going to be in trouble. We've got to unlearn hierarchy. We've got to learn the truth about the narratives, and we've got to complete the narratives so that we know more about ourselves and that we know more about others. And we have got to begin to work harder on building the we consciousness, because we're not going to manage to do this stuff except together. And we're getting on a dangerous slope here, and Winona's quite right about it. We're not going to get a lot of other chances, and this particular crisis we're in has given us great danger that we want to survive, but we want to be able to be ready to see and to look for the opportunities that can give us the possibility of being able to thrive. And we cannot do that disavowing the power and the importance of Mother Earth, and we cannot do that disavowing the importance and the regard and respect that should be given to all humanity. And so this particular moment that we find ourselves in, where we're still, everybody's been, you know, kind of thrown asunder, so to speak, except for these folks who are going out on the first line every day doing jobs from cleaning up behind folks to transporting folks, to helping people to get well, supporting the healers who are doing that, and all of the other things that have to happen, making sure the utilities are working so that we can have all of the various and sundry things that we happen to have. That we've really got to begin to understand that today, these really are the folks that are making the world work. While, you know, the rest of us who are not able to be in those kinds of circumstances or at home with children or doing some other kinds of things. And so it's really critical for us to use this as a moment of reckoning, you know, going from a time of no more into a time of not yet. And we're caught in a ship. And on the yet, we're on about the T, about to cross the T, because we're in that. We're smack dab right in the middle of it. And we've got to figure out how to manage to recreate all of these things that are falling apart. That is one of the advantages here, is that all of these institutions are crumbling. You know, health, economy, mental health, education, everything is is upset at this point in time. And we're not going to have forever to be able to get them back together. And we should not lean back to what it is that we were doing before. In New Orleans, we're aware of how things can change quickly by virtue of what we went through with the flood that happened associated with the Katrina hurricane, that there were lots of things that became better for a minute, and today people might not even be able to remember what they were, and that's only 15 years out. So we're not going to have forever to be able to reconstruct these institutions and the way they can be. And we've seen some miraculous things happen between January and now, in terms of how things can happen quickly when people want it to. And so we need to be imagining, we need to be innovating, and we need to be assuring that the value of Mother Earth and the value of people are the things that we're looking at, and not this other dichotomy that has come up, which is the one that's got to do with the economy versus the people. We really have to be able to essentially get it right this time, or we may not get another chance.
Say, Carol, since you've mentioned Katrina, and of course we tend to think of that as a natural disaster. We don't need to, of course, global warming has an impact on making these hurricanes and tornadoes much worse. But for the moment, let's set that aside and talk about the human political disaster that happened after Katrina, because in some ways that's part of the T that we're facing, right?
Yeah.
The disorganization that is ahead of us in terms of not having it together to transition out of this.
Yeah, I mean, our city was emptied out of the people. You know, there were very few people who were allowed to stay, and it took 6 to 8 weeks before people were allowed to come back. And I don't even know if we've gotten back to the population that we were before the flood happened. And I make the distinction about the flood and the hurricane, because the hurricane did not hit us. The hurricane came down here, curtsied, and then went east. It was our poor flood protection system, which was our levees, that really did the job on us. And so there, you know, we were not ready for that. And we are still recovering. You know, we would have thought that it would have been 10 years or 15, and now they're talking about it being 25 or 30, maybe even 50, before we managed to completely do what is a recovery. And in many ways, New Orleans was like a prophetic city for the country, because that was the do-over. That was a do-over. And we haven't done over everything in good standing. And so this is why I'm saying, here we are again with another opportunity to recreate infrastructure. And I'm talking about institutional infrastructure here. And we need to be thinking about the people that we're working so hard to try to reach now quickly, and how it is that we can fix it so that these folks are not so vulnerable. You know, and this is about being able to do everything from a livable wage to how the education system works, you know, all of these things, how the health system works. You know, and God knows we're going to need mental health help after all of this. We're going to have so many diagnoses, it's not going to be funny. And so we're going to need ways to be able to attend to that. And so we've got to think about what we're going through now, what is needing to happen, what kind of fractures we're discovering inside of our societal landscape. And we've got to be thinking about how it is that we can manage to not just get back to where we were so we can feel like it's familiar and therefore we can handle it, but to manage to have it be something better, something better, more inclusive.
Winona or Maria, did you want to jump in and just kind of, let's keep on going, and then we're going to start getting questions also coming in. So go ahead.
You got something, Maria? I got a few things to say. Go, okay. Hey, you know, I mean, I'm all ready to, I didn't like the last economy. Just want to put that out there.
Gotcha.
I think it really helped a lot of my people. Don't look like it, huh? Didn't help a lot of other people. Looked like a few guys got some money off of it, and a lot of people didn't get, things were made refugees, right? You know, so I'm all ready for the next economy, you know, and my particular field of work is, you know, I don't really like fighting pipelines. I spent 7 years fighting pipelines. That's not my gig really, but sometimes you gotta face them down, right? So hemp, this is my hemp fiber. I'm interested in the I call it the new green revolution. And that is hemp, because they say that a long time ago, like in the 1920s, we had a choice between a carbohydrate economy and a hydrocarbon economy. And guess which one we picked? We picked the hydrocarbon economy. But aren't those two words almost the same, carbohydrate and hydrocarbon? Well, that carbohydrate economy was hemp, because it turns out that all that stuff, you know, you can make your textiles out of it. You know, you can grow your fabric here. You could reindustrialize this country so it made sense. You know, you could have a bunch, in our case, there's a lot of tribal people that could grow this hemp because we have large land base. But, you know, so I'm all ready for building the next economy and making it, you know, and, you know, for your cities, that hempcrete is like, you know, a negative carbon footprint compared to concrete. You know what I'm saying? And, so I'm all ready to rebuild. This is the Green New Deal. You know, I do some tweaks on it, but I don't complain. They got, you know, Congress is barely amazing that they got it articulated as something, you know, but let's take that, you know, let's make something better, because we don't want to go back to what we had. People are all like, I want to go back to that. No, you don't. No, you don't. You want to go back, you know, you don't want to go back to a place where 75% of your pharmaceuticals are made in China. That's a bad idea. You don't want to go back to a place where you're growing shrimp in Scotland and deveining them in China and shipping them to Paraguay or something to ship here. You want to, like, maybe not eat so much shrimp, quite frankly. You know, maybe quit that. You know, maybe just start eating like little localer guys, you know. So we want an economy that makes sense. And, you know, I don't think that China really wants to be all full of all those toxic industries either. You know, those are all exported over there. They're like, oh, just let the Chinese do it. Just let the Chinese do it. Well, look at the mess we made, you know, with that whole strategy. So let's de-globalize. I was looking, so, you know, I was laughing because here's this book called Paradigm Wars. It looks backwards there, but this was 2005, and it's about Indigenous people and globalization. I was like, this is not a new idea. You know, people have been talking on a worldwide scale that you got to step back from globalization and move towards more relocalization. So anyway, that's what I was saying, is I'm right there with you, Sister Carol. Let's make the next economy, make it cool.
Maria, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm all for make it cool, right? Because we have the largest port on the Eastern Seaboard. And so 80% of the, I like, you know, I bushwork before gentrification, you know, so like, I love New York City, but New York City is kind of like the beating heart of capitalism, it feels like. And our port feeds that beating heart of capitalism, you know, because the stuff that comes on Fifth Avenue or the dollar store, it comes through the neighborhood on a truck. So I'm all for, let's stop bringing this stuff in. And I would love to see the land that's by the port become an actual, you know, meadowland. It should be swampy. It should be absorbing seawater rise. It shouldn't be full of concrete to move product, you know. I love some biodiversity in Newark. So definitely, I'm all with y'all.
You know, there's a lot of good jobs in fixing up messes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But the rest of our lives, man, the rest of our lives, we just got to keep these guys from making any more messes.
Oh yes,
that's
for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Maria, you mentioned the Meadowlands, which a lot of people kind of drive past. They think of it as a swampy, dirty, trashed area. And in some ways over the centuries, that's what it's become. But they also were, for the Lenape peoples, a very sacred site in which medicinal plants were growing. It was also the sites in which paths were coming together and converging, and really giving access really to the fish, and also to the ocean and to the beaches where the oysters were and the clams were. And what happened, clearly, excuse me, I'm a historian, is all the garbage that was being produced was being dumped into those sites on top of the oyster beds, and basically creating new land, and also creating kind of a dangerous, toxic mess that the Meadowlands are still recovering from today. So when you refer to the Meadowlands, you know, people think of maybe the sports stadiums, you know, that are now.
Jack, I think the Meadowlands are perfect, right? For what we're talking about. On the Meadowlands is, they tried to build the world's largest mall called American Dream, and it's been stalled out. So I'm hoping, you know, COVID finishes American Dream, and then the Meadowlands can come back. They also try to build a very, very large natural gas plant on the Meadowlands that, you know, a lot of groups that were in coalition with had to fight back. And it was a natural gas plant to serve the electrical needs of New York City. So much of the ravaging of this side of the river has been done in service of industry and in service of capitalism.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of things are going to be coming at all of us. This has been a traumatic experience for everybody. There's a way in which all of the adults are probably frustrated beyond belief. If we're not able to essentially get people's attention while they are recognizing and still feeling the pain, and manage to build a greater good consciousness, a we consciousness that has people willing to be able to do more than they've done in the past, to be able to be active in ways that they haven't been before, to be willing to sit at tables that they've not sat at before. If we're not, if we make the mistake of not trying to use this time as a time to manage to do that, then we're going to lose the powerful force that we need, which is the reforce.
So we've got comments starting to come in, and I'll just read some of them. And I want to encourage more people to ask us questions. We're happy to really engage. There's a comment from Cynthia Mellon about Agent Orange, and that saying that that dioxin is the byproduct of the Agent Orange that was produced to defoliate Southeast Asia and other places. And that that site in the Ironbound is the biggest Superfund site in the United States and the largest dioxin contaminated site in the world. I should also add that recently the Trump administration has pulled back on the mercury kind of regulations. And the Hackensack River, which is just adjacent to the Passaic River, is also one of the major sites terribly polluted with mercury poisoning. I grew up reading Life magazine and the photo essays about Minamata in Japan with the horrible deformations that mercury poisoning caused in Japan. And we right here in New York and New Jersey along the Hudson River have that same level of mercury poisoning. Rose says, love your emphasis, Winona, on finding ourselves. You know, so, I mean, that's kind of a, kind of an interesting question. Maybe we can kind of go to that, because finding ourselves oftentimes is seen as, well, that's navel gazing, it's introspective. Somehow that's not so important because that's psychological. Carol, you mentioned basically, the importance of Maslow, for example, and the kind of idea of really self-help in some ways that Maslow is kind of responsible for. One interesting thing I've learned recently is that Maslow actually pulled a lot of his ideas from the Blackfeet Indians, and that he kind of twisted some ideas around, focusing more on the individual when they were really focusing on the group as a whole. But this whole question of identity being so deeply linked to the society and the social context that we're a part of. I mean, Carol, I mean, I think part of what you've done, and also Maria, what you've done, is that you've been building organizations and addressing kind of these larger questions within which individuals can thrive. I don't know if one of you or both of you want to kind of comment about that.
Yeah, I think that I think the whole issue of evolving ourselves, like the notion that the beginning of change starts with the self. that we didn't escape this stuff. We grew up in it. Children are not born knowing this stuff. They learn it after they get into the world with the people that become their families, with the society that they manage to become a part of. And so it begins with us, and that, you know, we're either racist or internalized racist, and we spend the rest of our lives trying to get out of that particular kind of hierarchical thinking. And so we have to start there, and we've got to be open to understanding all of the stuff that's going on. I mean, these nurses and doctors have to think about too, you know, the sacrifice that they're making and the lives that they are working to save, and the value of that, those lives and their lives as being like equal. Like, this is the way we're supposed to operate in the world, that everybody's life is of value. And we've not been taught that. We've been taught a hierarchy, so that there are some people that we just don't care about, that prisoners are locked up, sometimes not even with charges against them right now when we've got this virus going on, and we're not doing the best that we can to be able to get them out so that they can be safe. So it begins with us being able to work on ourselves, to build a stronger we consciousness. The society we live in now does not move us toward a we consciousness. It is very much an I me kind of consciousness. And so being able to work on essentially altering that and building common and collective work, so that we are able to be organized, that we're able to work collectively to accomplish things, because we have lost our way in terms of having that as a second nature way of operating. We still have the muscle somewhere. It can be tickled and it can be built, but it's not second nature anymore. And so it is about being able to work on ourselves. And I think that this period that we're in, where we're all subject to this virus and the behaviors that it's generating in us, is an opportunity for us to essentially be still and to be doing some self-checking.
Maria, you know, the students that we have at Rutgers at Newark, but also the young people you work with and the people you do gardening with in the Ironbound are basically, as I'm learning more and more, really people who are now on the front lines and doing all sorts of things that when they first got the jobs, they thought was just the, you know, just being able to get a job and being able to pay the bills. But suddenly, with this current crisis, people who were just kind of on the quote unquote low level jobs, delivering food, stocking shelves,
yep.
And people cleaning hospitals, those now are the frontline workers. And so can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, because in some ways, all of a sudden, we now have to value, and we should be valuing all the time, these people who have been doing this work all along, but it's been largely invisible, and it's largely been undervalued.
Yeah, you know, I think it goes back to something Carol and Winona both said about the hierarchies that have been conditioned to believe, right? That somehow there is more value in someone that sits around and talks all day. Starting to feel that way with the Zoom business. But somehow there's more value in that than working with your hands. You know, at the garden where we teach, like being able to connect with the earth and being able to grow up food is sacred, because first things first, we need food and water, right? And we need clean air. It's like really going, it should be the basics. It really should be the basics, because it is the basic blocks of life. Like everything needs nourishment and water and oxygen. But it seems to be, we have a suicidal, homicidal society, right? That is always trying to take those things away and put people in harm's way. So at the garden, we always, I don't know, it's just like weird. I'm trying to work with the way you framed it for me, but it's always been clear that workers should be are dignified, right? Like we're all a dignified people. And going back to like the identity piece, it's like we have to like embrace our values, because that's something our society is constantly demeaning or making it seem like extra on top. It's nice if you can connect with your culture, but you know, with with our organization and with a lot of our partners, it's just like culture's at the heart of it. If you're in Newark, like culture's at the heart of it. You know, in so many of our communities, it doesn't the culture and making sure that we're instilling the value inherent embrace and uplift the basic blocks, building blocks of life, you know, connecting around food, around the people who made that food. I mean, someone that makes good food, I think that's the most essential, right? And the folks that helped us grow that and then move that to the table. So I think that it should have never been invisible. In our neighborhood, it's not invisible. Like I said, we see the food come in because unfortunately in this country, we import so much of our food. And so it comes in through the ports and we see the truck drivers who load it up, then it goes to the warehouse. You know, there's a HelloFresh factory right next to the Superfund site. Like the contradictions of society are things like we could walk to. But I think for us, what's really important is always keeping in mind like interdependence. Like as much as an individual, I can go and try to get my mind right, connect with my culture and do this. If I'm not doing it as a practice of community, then I can't really get that far. You know, I can't get that far because I need to be interconnected and interconnected beyond my family. Because I think the nuclear family is also an extension of that individualism of like, this is my family, you know, but as opposed to like, these are all the interconnected families. And similar to organizing, there are definitely folks who are egotistical, right? And who think that there's only one way to shift our society. But I think, again, it's an interconnected community made of a lot of families who all know how to do special things. Some people grow the food, some people cook the food, some people do good talks, right? There is a place for folks, everyone, to participate. And so I'm hoping that that's the new society that we can shape, where we value all the different roles and don't need, you know, like my left hand and my right hand are both equally important, even if I use one more than the other. And so I hope that we can move into that more interdependent consciousness.
Wow, beautifully spoken. We've got Ann Pack from White Salmon, Washington, and also Syracuse, New York. What advice do you have for high school students who are stepping into leadership advocacy roles with environmental stewardship? Clearly, we know that it's really the youth who are now leading so much of what's going on, and we're kind of trying to keep up with them. But any thoughts about that?
I'm the youth on the elder on the panel. So I think one thing that we always stress to the young people is not to get sucked up into the recycling BS. You know, we have a recycling plant in the neighborhood. It's just not going to come through like those individual actions that capitalism tricked a lot of folks into believing. You know, I'm not trashing, bring your own bag, but like, let's think bigger and better. Like we can actually shift what we value. And if we value, you know, our plastic, our water, we'll always carry our water. So if we switch values, we don't have to change behavior one off, you know? So I think as you're stepping into leadership, it's easy to go for the low hanging fruit. But if you listen to the elders, I think they're always beckoning us to have bigger, bolder visions, you know? And that's what I would hope for young folks who are stepping into this is, I think there's a disservice done of like start small. I think you can start really big and not get tricked, and I'm saying that just because there's too much urgency to spend, you know, 10 years trying to get one university to, you know, collect their recycling bins. I'm all for the people that do that, but I'm also like, we're out of time. So I think we need to all put our energies into shifting society and not accept those compromises that I think are always presented to us, especially when we're starting, because people think you should start small, you know? In Newark, we've been able to pass amazing systems changing laws, and that's actually a small thing in comparison to the problem that we're facing. You know, we're trying to bring down a racist capitalist society. So that's a big undertaking. And so I hope that even when folks are starting off, they have really big, bold visions.
Maria, part of what you're talking about, I think, is also related to capitalism in terms of how there are sectors of capitalists who are preying on disasters. They're kind of waiting for the next disaster. This happened in New Orleans, this happened in Puerto Rico, this happens everywhere. There's a major natural or human-made disaster, and they're really betting on making money in those situations. When Winona mentioned the Wendigo kind of cannibalism, that in some ways we can just see that sector coming alive and becoming happy when these kinds of events happen, and they're betting really for these disasters to be able to make a lot of their money. We have another question about how all the different sectors of progressives, I mean, this is the big question, that are scattered across North America and the world. How do we begin to work together around these kinds of environmental issues? Because so much of what goes on is that we're divided for various reasons. So, you know, as organizers and as cultural organizers, I guess I'm really interested in thoughts about how we come together, especially as we go through that portal.
Well, I think one of the things that has come up before when here in New Orleans is that often when we have the segment groups, LGBTQ, environmental, you know, we've often discovered that when we're dealing with race issues, that these folks are not present for those kinds of organizing efforts. And so I think it's really important for all of us who are working for progress to understand that this is about reciprocity. It is about being thorough in terms of how it is that we are seeking justice, and that justice is looks different from the perspective that you're working from, and that we have to find ways to be able to show up for each other. And that we can't constantly be of the opinion that our particular area of work is the most important part, the hierarchy again. And so we have to be able to sit at the table and have patience and attention and presence for the various and sundry ways in which justice has not been done.
Beautifully said. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I just, you know, I think, I mean, I look and there's a lot of opportunities for people to work together because that's how a lot of these things are going to get solved. And so I'm really like, I'm not good on, well, I don't get out much. I mean, I get out to give lectures, but like, I don't want to spend my time talking about how we're all different and how each of whose oppression is the most important, you know? I want to be like how we solve this, right? And what do you got? You got some cool thing there in the city? Like, so like tomorrow, this Hmong weaver is going to come see me about that hemp. Now that's kind of cool. That's like the urban guy, right? You know, he's going to show up at the farm. He's going to spend the day. You want to know what we're doing. And I was like, that's like the coolest thing I ever heard. You know, I would never meet this guy. So, you know, in this crisis is opportunity. You know, I mean, I see my mom lives in Oregon, and like some people go take care of my mom. You know, I don't live near my mom, right? You know what I'm saying is that people are kind of refining their humanity. We got to stay human, you know, because we've been kind of told that we're, you know, I think a lot of people turn into wage slaves. So what I always say is that difference, Trudell said, the difference between a wage slave and a slave in chains is that the second one knows exactly where he stands, right? You know what I'm saying? Is it's like, so we're in this moment where we got to probably get away from capitalism, rely on each other. That extended family thing you were talking about, Maria, I'm all about that. That nuclear family, that's crazy. That requires a lot of support by things that cost you money, you know? When if you have extended family, I mean, I'm grandma, and right now I got like six kids across the road with the horses, you know? I mean, I'm their homeschool program. They're having the time of their life, man. Of course, who wouldn't want to go to Winona's homeschool, right? You know, but my point is that in the crisis, people like me got to step up, right? And so we get to be these better people. And so, I don't know. I mean, I like to work with anybody who wants to do something. If you want to talk about, I don't really want to work with you because you should just keep talking, you know? I wanna, if you're doing whatever cool thing you're doing, I'm right there.
I think there's a migration now of people heading your way, Winona, to homeschool with you.
Yes.
Actually, Eva Blake is asking if you have sweetgrass on your farm. Well, actually, this is a question for both Winona, but also for Maria, because Eva Blake can send you seeds. So if that's something you're interested in, we can.
Eva, hook me up. I
Yeah,
can
right.
grow out here.
Yeah,
I think it
Eva, I think that's you.
needs starts. Yeah.
Please send it
You
along.
You should grow hemp, sister. Maria, you know that hemp bioremediates?
Yeah.
Did you know this? You heard this?
I'm getting all sorts of ideas from here.
Fiber hemp, because it turns out if it's 8 feet tall, it's 8 feet below the roots. And that pulls all that stuff out, right? And then you got to stabilize it in some kind of something to keep it like out of the environment. But you can, I mean, people are asking me at Navajo, you know, for seeds, for fiber seeds, you know? And because they got radioactive waste and they got all kind of nasty stuff, you know? So what if we had ways that were right with us in our little hands to fix things, you know? I mean, for me, that's what interests me about this moment is I feel like that is that, you know, I mean, you know, in the case of hemp, which I just keep talking about, right? But it's not about me growing my little CBD plant so I can be all high and happy. It's about creating a new economy, you know, that a lot of people could be part of for different reasons, you know? So I just see this opportunity to go big out of small, but I like those sweetgrass seeds. winonashemp@gmail.com.
We've got I think a very important question. If you three, but perhaps also people who are watching in, can share stories about how you've been dealing with COVID impacts on their organizations and communities, and what can we learn from this process? That's a very big question, but I think probably Maria and perhaps Carol are kind of in the midst of these things, and they've been doing this kind of thinking and working way before COVID kind of hit the neighborhoods. But any insights you have, and then we'd welcome other people to jump in on that. So please keep on sending us messages.
Well, with the kind of this thread that we've been having about starting with self, you know, like I said, I finished being at work as of the end of 2019. And so I found myself trying to figure out, like, how could I be a contribution personally? And so I had to reconfigure my day. And so my day now has 2 or 3 hours a day when I'm just checking up and on folks, and I make myself available to help people think through things that they're trying to do. And I'm trying to learn as much as I can about how to stay safe myself and how to continue to help people to understand the implications of the hygiene that you have to keep yourself safe when you're encountering other people. And then I'm using it as a time to be still and to think about kind of what does it mean to be a minimal carol? Because I think that that's part of what this time has taught us, which is the fact that more is not better, that we have to discover how to do, do with less. I've cooked more, they're just, I keep looking for more and more ways to figure out how it is that I position myself for the readiness for when it works out that we are in whatever our next era is, and we are having to do the things that we're going to have to do, that we're not even able to even imagine right now. We don't know what it's going to be like. Well, now they're talking about the fall, that we might have the flu and COVID coming at us. So we don't know when it's going to be, and we don't know what it's going to be. So it starts there, and it's about being aware of what's going on. We have food lines, actual food lines that are developing in our country right now. Like, how can we manage to make whatever we're doing something that can be a contribution there or somewhere else? Can we help some of these moms and grandmothers that are trying to do, they can get lessons from Winona on how to keep it fun and all, but how do we help them as they're being overwhelmed with trying to keep their children on a learning track? So it is about starting with the thing you have the most control over, which is yourself. And then it's about hooking up with other people and helping some folks that feel like they're lost and that they can't do anything, that there really are things that they can do, and to help them to think about what those things are so that they can start doing what they can do.
We've got a comment from Roz L. You surely cannot be afraid to step bravely and make a big jump. I'm also not bashing anyone who has started small. In fact, I commend that as well, but go brave. There are also other people commenting about how, of course, we've got to go organic, not GMO, please. And also Claudia from West New York, do you perceive this current crisis as the gate to a new Renaissance era? Can you mention some of the most important change we as a human race have to confront ourselves with? So we had started, Claudia, with Arundhati Roy's quote about there are two ways of going through the portal of the pandemic. One is to drag all that stuff, all those things, all the problems, all the unresolved issues through that portal with us, the dead things, the polluted rivers. Or we can go through lightly, as she's saying, in which we are really carrying with us the things that we most care about and want to fight for. So a lot of this discussion is revolving around that. What do we want to fight for? And the bottom line, what is it that we care about the most? We also have Sharon Howard saying, we have outsourced America. I'd be interested in people commenting about that. Winona, you're kind of alluding to that. Part of what I'm afraid of as Asian American and as someone whose family is from China is that, of course, it's very easy to say, well, China is the source of all American problems, or that the reason why we have why we can't recycle so much. I mean, this gets back to Maria's recycling issue. The reason we can't recycle anymore is that China is not taking our recycling stuff, right? So a lot of things go back to China, and I'm also, but I'm also very sensitive and aware of what people are saying in terms of going local, right? So maybe Winona, you could kind of clarify how you feel about that.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about that. The United States economy is all jacked up on steroids and fossil fuels. That's it. So we created this economy that makes really no sense. And globalization was really about a bunch of guys making a lot of profits off of other people's labor. And, and so the US economy needs a structural adjustment. That's what it needs. Mm-hmm. It's not about, we exported all that stuff to China and we dumped all those toxins on China. So my suggestion is, it's like, I was at this place in Montana in Missoula called Bayern Brewery. And those guys washed beer bottles. They washed like beer bottles, like 40 million beer bottles or something. I don't know, some huge amount. But the point is that you don't need to have single-use containers. Mm-hmm. You don't need to keep making junk. And what you need to do is wash your junk and not have it be junk. You need to quit producing obsolete things, like how many darn phones you need with all those different phone jacks. Every time I turn around, there's some new weird phone jack that I need. That's dumb. Make things that last, not out of plastic. Move beyond plastics. That'd be super helpful. And so, I totally do not blame China. I blame American economy. I blame capitalism. Mm-hmm. I blame the creation of, all of this, and I want it all relocalized. I mean, we offshored our textile industry in the 90s to Asia. Mm-hmm. So put a lot of people in the South out of jobs in mills, and those people would like those jobs. Mm-hmm. It's decent. It's a respectable job. My grandma worked for the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. Mm-hmm. That should be a good job. Mm-hmm. A proud job, so H&M, all those industry places that make all that stuff that's not necessary, get a little more simple. Mm-hmm. I know y'all are going to laugh at me, but where I live, I told you where I live already. but I live just geographically north of the Amish. My neighbors are Amish, you know, and I feel like it's like this like political, spiritual place too. You know, those guys are a little bit more old school than I might be. You know what I mean? But they got a lot of choices that they made, and they made those choices as communities. We didn't make these choices as communities. We were told this is what the deal is. And I think if we made community choices, we'd say, we want food, that we want to know who the butcher is. We want to know, we want the farmer's market. We want to, you know, taste good stuff. We don't want to be all stressed out trying to buy stuff we don't need. You know, we don't want to turn our barns that used to have animals in them into places where you store your big boats, right? You know, I live in a different part of the world than y'all live, but we're all in the same place where, you know, a lot of people just want to live good, have good food, have good family, not be stressed out, right?
So Fortunate Jawara, excuse me if I've got your name mangled, would ask us to bring in a labor perspective to the discussion. How do we transition without leaving some people behind? How do we envision decarbonization and people who are still able to keep jobs? Because the reality of capitalism requires them to basically work those carbon dependent jobs. So in part, this is a question about the green economy and what kind of vision do we have for a green economy? So maybe we'll kind of wrap up with that question. I'm sure each of you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I could start because I think it's weird that there's like a economy of like the workers. We have the capitalism. You know, when capitalism doesn't protect the workers, it makes them, it exposes them to terrible conditions. You know, like that's a fight in Newark we sometimes have, or used to have actually. Our mayor right now is pretty good on it. Is that warehouse jobs are jobs, but they don't care about people. You know, they're often like temp agencies, terrible conditions. They don't even keep someone long enough to give them benefits, right? And so it's not environment versus jobs, that there can be abundance. Like there is, we live on an abundant earth that we don't know how to be in right relationship with. So I think that in terms of labor, you know, like I always get confused because in our neighborhood, you know, we're working poor. So definitely, as we transition, I hope that we see jobs that protect the dignity of folks and that there's abundance. You know, like not everyone might be able to have a job, but can we guarantee them a basic income? Can we, I always think about that with the coal industry, right? Like there's folks I know that they're afraid because they're like, I'm too old to maybe start a new career. Why can't we just pay for them to be able to still have a great quality of life, recognizing their industry had a goal for the good of us, which is, I think, going back to what y'all was saying, if we made decisions as a community, we would make sure that everyone in our community is taken care of as we transition, because the transition is inevitable. And I know that that's why we need to make sure that folks that represent our communities are part of deciding where it goes, because justice is definitely not inevitable. This country has never put justice first. So how do we make sure that folks who have been traditionally left out, who aren't, you know, sometimes we fight with the port because a lot of those union jobs are really white folks jobs, right? They won't let Black and Latino people in there. So people that live in Newark don't have access to the good quality jobs sometimes. And so I do want to like not have a dichotomy that puts like labor versus the environment, but actually thinks like there are workers in our community and we need to take care of those workers and we need to take care of everyone. You know, so some industries do have to go for the good of all of us, but the people who work in those industries, they're not disposable. We have to bring them with us, you know, and take care of them and whatever their needs might be when that industry goes, you know, in a way that protects their health and their families and their, you know, extended family.
Yeah, Maria, you're bringing up the whole question about scarcity, and in some ways, just alongside disaster capitalism, there's this kind of scarcity economics in which the whole argument is that there's not enough for everybody, so everybody has to prove themselves to be better than each other and to be deserving of making more money. And part of, I think, what's being proposed in some versions of the Green New Deal, certainly Naomi Klein is talking about this, which is that jobs that are really renewable for people and human service jobs, people taking care of older people, people doing childcare, teachers, there are a lot of these jobs that are really about building in, that are human to human kinds of capacity building. And that's part of some versions of the Green New Deal, which is actually quite important when we talk about jobs and areas of work that are kind of devalued, especially.
And so with the thing that I would add here, the little bit that I would add, because I know that Winona is going to have a lot to be able to say about this too, is that, you know, going back to my planning career, if you set brilliant planners down to think primarily about people and how to manage to attend to the needs of people, their ability to work, provide for their families, and to really work on that as your priority, then we can figure it out. When you sit down and try to decide how you can make more money and have that be the thing that drives how it is that you design and grow and implement, then you get something different. And so it is simple as that, is that we've got to want to decide that our energy can also be wind power and solar energy. And then we can take people who are not working somewhere else and put them in these other fields that we start to open and to make really active for people to be able to work in. But as long as the love of money and the pursuit of it are the things that are leading, then we won't be able to take care of the laborers. And so it is, again, about having people to have their values, to have a culture of justice, to grow up so that everybody is in their own way interpreting the need for us to be making decisions that are about people more than they are. We're in that circumstance right now with the testing and the this and the that and the other. It's the issue of the cost and the problem it's going to be for the economy versus the need to take care of the people.
You know, some of this stuff didn't even have to do with COVID. I was like looking at that stuff on automation. I mean, basically they're making humans obsolete, you know, in some of that. I mean, truck drivers, come on, you know, I mean, so this is this trend in capitalism, which was, you know, creating surplus humans and, you know, and so, you know, I feel like that there's plenty of room to do some things, you know, and that the other thing is that to me, you know, while there has been this move towards globalization, there's also been a very strident move towards relocalization. And, you know, because people know that it's a lot of times, you know, I'm a member of the slow food movement. And I know a lot of people think that's like, I don't know what they think about it, but we won an award because of our wild rice. You know, it grows on our lakes and rivers. You harvest it with some sticks in a canoe, you parch it over a fire. You know, we're like old school people, but that's an artisan gift, you know, and there are a lot of them out there and you can't get those at Walmart. You don't get like quality. And the more people take back their power, you see with the microbreweries and the micro cheeseries and the whatevers, the more people take back their power, the healthier we're going to be, you know? And so to me, and that doesn't have to do with race, that has to do with taking back your power, you know? And so I just see this opportunity that you know, where I live, I mean, there's a lot of, this is like Republican country, and then there's the Ojibways. The Amish don't vote, so they don't count in that equation. But this is all Republicans around here, you know, and there's, you know, there's a lot of Indian hating, and we call it the deep north up here. And, but you know, some of those guys, like by this summer, I'll tell you what, they're all going to be stopping at my little farm stand and buying hemp pasta. I bet you, I kid you not, because they're all out here in the woods with me. And they're going to want to, you know what I'm saying, is it's like make the better plan. That's my strategy. Make the better plan. Don't wait for permission. Don't even ask. Why would you? You know, make the cool plan, and then pretty soon they'll come along. You know, they already do. They pull in my yard, cop pull in my yard, everybody flee. I go talk to the cop. I say, what's up? He says, I want to grow hemp. Right? You know, so a lot of people want to live with dignity. Some people don't. We don't want to get a headache trying to change some of those guys. I don't. I'm too
old. We've got a summer elder regarding what folks are doing locally to adapt and resist all of this. I'm an acupuncturist and herbalist in Florida. Many of my colleagues and myself have been providing telemedicine consults with people to keep them healthy and treat people naturally who believe they have COVID, since we cannot currently treat people in person. We've also consulted with other herbalists from various backgrounds in an effort to share knowledge to help people stay healthy and heal. Out in California, Chinese medicine practitioners are treating patients alongside conventional physicians to improve patient outcomes. We really need to weave the best of both worlds, or many worlds, conventional and natural medicines and healthcare. One of my colleagues and myself are also working on building a structure similar to the healing center that is located in New Orleans. Change is coming. Winona, in some ways, your vision is not separating out healthcare from food, from doing good work, from finding meaningful work. So all these things are kind of integrated. And do you see that as something that we as a very complex, highly segmented society can move into? I mean, how do you see that transition happening in the way that you talk about, in a graceful way that all people can be a part of?
Well, there's the macro and the micro. On the macro level, you need something like gross national happiness indexing. We need to value quality of life versus, stock profits, right?
Yep.
And so, we need to rethink those things. And, I go all the time. I mean, I go to colleges all the time, but even high schools, I'm like, quit teaching that stuff. Quit teaching that unreal economic model. Let's teach life economics, right? And then, there's a lot of different approaches, to all of this, but I really know that there are a lot of people that are working on these solutions. And, it's not like, I get to talk about it some, but, people want to solve problems. Some days I hang my head at humans and I was like, we're just a waste of space, man. I'm sure the rest of you are like, not that quite that like that, but I just get like, oh man, dumb things we do. And then we come up with something really cool. Now's our time. Show what we're worth, find some solutions and learn from people everywhere. You got one shot at the learning experiment. I forgot what you asked me, Jack, but that was my response.
No, it's all good. Maria, we're going to need to wind down now. We've already gone way past, but at the same time, we've got a lot of people writing in and asking, but let's wind down soon. So I guess I was hoping, Maria, if you wanted to say a few words, maybe linking the current crisis to where you think we need to be going with the crises to come. If we were to accept the IPCC predictions that in the coming 10 years, there's going to be a cascading, converging effect of global impacts in our region. Certainly we know in New Jersey, New Orleans, with increasing big weather events, the 100, once in 100-year weather event that's happening, that seems to be happening on a every other year kind of basis. What do you think this pandemic can help us understand?
I love those super big questions that are really not answered. So I guess I'll start off small. And this one is just, we don't need a 100-year storm. I feel like people who know me know I say this all the time. We just need 15 minutes of rain because there's so much concrete. So yeah, I'll take some hemp concrete because our neighborhood is just overly paved. So if it rains for 15 minutes, you can't really get out because there's only so many ways in and out of our low-lying neighborhood. That's why they call it down bottom. So anyway, we can't get up top, right? So I think about that, and that's like before COVID, right? I think how screwed we were as a city, as a country, as a peoples, and I think about COVID giving us how can I explain this? And you know, I'm gonna just say it, not everything comes out right, so forgive me, I'm human. But for a lot of folks, there's like less to lose, you know. I've seen our neighborhood hemorrhage over COVID, people losing, you know, the very little that they had. And that's an unfortunate way to have to come into things. But I've been seeing the power of community, though, of like folks that were kind of on the fringe, but they knew that, you know, we kind of organize and try to build this interdependent web of folks, and they're plugging into that. So I am hoping, you know, in our small neighborhood way, that that becomes the practice moving forward, that we realize that we do need our neighbors and that our destinies are intertwined, that it's convenient. It's not just like helpful. It's very convenient to know your neighbor across the street, to know the people down the block, to have someone that could check on you or go get food for you, or someone that has extra medicine, someone that has herbs over here, you know, like, and be able to plug into that, to those networks. So I do hope that one thing that we always try to do is we resist the bad, right? But we have to like have a vision together, a shared community vision. And that's something we've been doing anyway, as a community, as a city, right? Like we're always trying to have plans and big visions, but I hope that our visions become less rooted in capitalism now that we can get this really clear understanding that it's so fragile. You know, that even things like big oil can fail and go into the ground overnight, and that's amazing. And so we should build a future based in relationship with each other. And so, you know, as the system crumbles, our system can rise up.
Yeah, Carol, when you're talking about the we, in some ways, a lot of the people coming into the country from other places are bringing that we mentality with them. It hasn't been unlearned. They're still practicing it. The extended family kind of concept and the interrelationships of people supporting each other to then sacrifice for the kid or someone else in the family. That we-ness has been kind of very much a part of many other old worlds. And in some ways, the longer people are in this country and the more isolated and lonely they become, it's actually hard to get back to that sense of we-ness. But maybe you can kind of help us understand that kind of paradox.
Well, you know, again, it's adaptation. You know, 2 generations, 3 generations, or 4 generations, and then it's gone. I have worked with some of the members of our community, for instance, in the Vietnamese community, and by like the 2nd generation, you've already got the tension building between the family and what goes on in the regular world. That's different than what it used to happen in the family. I think the big thing is that we're looking for someone who's going to fix this. And we're not discovering that the somebodies that are going to fix this are us. We're the ones. We're the ones that are going to have to fix this. There's not somebody that's going to be elected or is going to ride in on a horse or drive in a truck of some kind and save us from this. That we're going to have to reckon with this, and we're going to have to work together to figure out how we get out of this, and that we do it in a way that's going to be better, that we are not going to be able to take everything that we've had before. That is something that we can remember in our memories, that we're going to have to find a way to be able to imagine a way of living together that allows us to be inextricably connected the way we really are. We're discovering that in this, the way that this virus works, that we're inextricably connected to each other. And so we're going to have to find ways to be able to manage to get back to that way of being. I find myself sitting and trying to figure out, like, guessing. And I figured out that's not what I need to be guessing. What I need to be guessing is I need to be looking and watching so that I can discover where it is that I'm supposed to be, so that I can get myself there, so that I can be one of the hands that are being put on this moral arc so that it begins to bend toward justice. And all of us are being asked to do that. There's nobody that we can defer our part to. We're all being asked to find our place and to get busy.
Wow, beautifully said, all of you. Before I give the last word to Winona, I just wanted to thank all the folks at the Climate Day Prize Institute, the place that I work, and people I love there. Thank you so much, staff, for really making all this possible and for us enabling us to try to step up to the moment. Winona, you get the final words.
Hey, you know, it was really a privilege to meet you all, you know, here virtually across that. Nice to meet you, sisters. Always nice to know someone's out there, you know, and I know that's true. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of ways to build our power. I do have to mention, I think we all know that it is 2020 and there's an election.
Yes.
You know, there's so, you know, there's like the abstract, there's the go solar, get local food, and then there's the get your people out to vote.
Oh, yes.
Right. And then elect people that actually are going to make the Green New Deal or make some transition, you know. But I think that the writing's on the wall for a lot of these guys because they know that there's problems. I mean, like that minus $37 a barrel for oil has got to bite, you know. And so, you know, the point is that it is time to take measured, calm, loving leadership and start building our power or rebuilding it or reclaiming it or rematriating it, you know, and in that, I think, you know, a lot of good will come. And you know, I was listening to you, Carol, you know, I up here, the refugees, I got kind of refugees from the Twin Cities that come to their lake homes, you know, refugees, we call them. So they're talking about these meetings that they have, like 6 hours of Skype Zoom meeting every day, talking about what's going to happen, and they don't know what's going to happen. I said, why don't you just do something?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? There's all these people that are going like this, like what's going to happen? Like, how are we going to figure out our fall semester? I don't know. You know, I mean, I get that at some level, but at some level I was like, be here now. You know, do something cool now rather than figure out, because we don't know. But what we know is that you're going to need to eat. You know, you're going to need some heat. You're going to need to feel like you changed your world and stayed a little healthier, you know, and a lot of that stuff we can do. So, you know, I'm just privileged, happy to be here, visit, you know, in these interesting times. And, you know, I think it's really remarkable, the amount of communication going on along cross sectors. And we didn't have to fly on our brooms to get there. Excuse me, I call it my broom. You know, and that's okay. But everybody do continue being beautiful. It was nice meeting you all. Nice seeing you, Jack, as always.
Absolutely.
Winona LaDuke, thank you so much. Carol Bebelle, thank you so much. Maria Lopez Nuñez, thank you so much. It's really been a fantastic discussion. And thank you all for joining us in this Earth Day meditation commemoration.